What is going on, APUSH peeps? Video number 37 for you today. Laissez Faire, the industrial workforce, and the New South. Lots of good info in this video. Before we begin, I have to give a shout out to Mr. Piconi's class in San Marino, California. Thanks for the support. I appreciate it. Best of luck. You all will do awesome this year. All right, let's start off talking about Laissez Faire, a very important topic for period 6 and really the study of American history and government. What is it? Well, it's a French term that means the government policy of not regulating the economy. Perhaps you've heard it is that the government keeps its hands off the economy. This was an idea that originated from Adam Smith in 1776 in his famous publication, The Wealth of Nations. He argued that markets or the economy should be regulated by the invisible hand of supply and demand and have as little government interference as possible. This is going to be used by businesses to justify practices and wealth. And we'll see this with Carnegie in the steel industry, Rockefeller in the oil industry, and JP Morgan in the banking industry. They all will advocate laissez-faire and the government not regulating businesses and the economy. So jumping over to the industrial workforce, 2/3 of workers worked for wages. Many worked 6 days a week at 10 hours a day. That is 60 hours a week, a very large amount of time per week. Children often worked as well to provide for families. You see this famous picture here of children working in a factory. They often helped provide money for their families. So let's talk about internal and international migration in regards to the industrial workforce. For internal migration, you have many farmers that move to cities to work in factories. International migration, or migration from other countries, you have new immigration during this time, which is predominantly Southern and Eastern Europe. Do me a favor and circle or highlight for me Southern and Eastern Europe. This is going to be the opposite of old immigration, which is Northern and Western Europe. Southern and Eastern Europe includes places like Italy and Poland and other countries around there. And Chinese immigration will also be occurring on the West Coast. And in 1882, we will see the Chinese Exclusion Act, which will ban Chinese immigration to the United States for many years to come. So labor versus management, we have lots of issues between these two groups. Conflicts will emerge over the following issues: wages, or the amount of money that labor is being paid, that workers are being paid, working conditions, and as a result, workers will organize labor unions on the local and national level. So workers will form unions to try to improve their positions at their work. So let's talk about some unions you should be familiar with. We have the National Labor Union. This was created in 1866, and they fought for higher wages and an 8-hour workday. They also saw equal rights for women and African Americans. The Knights of Labor is one of the more famous unions. It was led by Terence Powderly, pictured here with one of the most luscious mustaches in U.S. history. This was composed of skilled and unskilled workers. Please make sure you know that. The Knights of Labor had skilled and unskilled workers. They sought to abolish child labor and as well as trusts and monopolies. And unfortunately for the Knights, they will decline after the Haymarket Square riot in 1886. This was a large protest in Chicago, and an anarchist threw a bomb, killing a couple people, and the Knights of Labor were blamed for it. So shortly after, we have another labor union that emerges, and this is called the American Federation of Labor. And not to be outdone by Terence Powderly with his mustache, we have Samuel Gompers, who is the leader, and this is comprised of only skilled workers. The Knights of Labor had skilled and unskilled. The American Federation of Labor, or the AFL, only had skilled workers. And they focused on bread and butter issues, which means things like an 8-hour workday and higher wages. So some key strikes to know. Strike, by the way, is when you refuse to work and you picket. You carry signs. So what do you do when you go on strike? You picket. What do you do when your nose goes on strike? Yeah, you know it. You picket. Okay, so the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, this was a reaction to wage cuts, and this will be a common thread for these strikes. They will be a reaction to wage cuts. President Hayes will eventually intervene and side with the railroads and order an end to this strike. In 1892, we have the Homestead strike at the Carnegie Steel Plant, and this was a reaction to wages being cut by 20%. Strike breakers were called in, and eventually the workers do go back to work. The Pullman strike dealt with the Pullman Palace Car Company, which were luxury railroad cars. When the workers went on strike at this and refused to work on any trains that had a Pullman Palace car, the workers went on strike, and President Cleveland will use troops to end the strike. So we see here that the government is often going to side with businesses when workers go on strike. So the New South is a topic you should be familiar with. Some Southern leaders called for what is known as a New South. You have people like Henry Grady, who was the editor of the newspaper, the Atlantic Constitution, and he called for increased industrialization in the South and the emergence of more textile factories. A lot of people believe the South lost the Civil War because they weren't as industrialized as the North. So a lot of people are starting to call for industrialization to occur in the South. However, even though there is this New South emerging, sharecropping and tenant farming remained a constant. If you remember, sharecropping and tenant farming is leasing land and paying for it with a share of crops. So let's do a quick recap here. We have laissez-faire and justification of wealth, the industrial workforce, no internal as well as international migrants that made up the industrial workforce, unions, be familiar with a couple of them, and key strikes, be able to identify and explain one or two of them as well. And finally, the New South, what is it? What did it call for? All right, guys, look forward to see you back here for video number 38, the Populist Party. We're going to discuss farmers and look at a very important political cartoon. Thanks for watching. Best of luck this year, and have a good day.